Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Legal Nurse Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about something that affects all of us, which is dealing with fear and taking risks and getting out of our comfort zone, which we absolutely have to do when we're in a competitive, high-stakes field like legal nurse consulting. I brought on the show a person who is a life coach, a business strategist. She's a writer and a speaker, and she produces a podcast called the Happiness Potential Podcast. She's a yoga and meditation instructor, and she runs a project called Happiness Potential. Melissa Lucas and I met at a C-suite event in Philadelphia not long ago, and it was her birthday of her book, the day that her book was released, called Stepping Out of Your Comfort Zone by Melissa Lucas. Love the colors on the cover, Melissa. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Hi, yes, good to see you again. I'm glad we could reconnect and I'm happy that I'm here.
Thank you. I brought you on the show because a lot of the people who listen are self-employed and are either in the position of having just left a job, or they're not self-employed and they're thinking about starting a business, or they've got some type of a risk they have to face in their business. Tell me how you got interested in the subject of stepping out of your comfort zone.
Well, I think obviously it started with my own personal experience, right? I had a major self-awakening moment where I realized I wasn't happy in my everyday life. I just wasn't living the life that was making me feel good every day. So, as I started thinking, what is it that I should be doing to be living my life to the fullest, I started, trying to do some self-discovery and find out what that meant. So it started right with me, right? I had some really great jobs at some really great corporate companies where I was making a lot of money and having everything I wanted, but I just didn't feel fulfilled. So I would, leave a job, go to another job, and I just couldn't, nothing was clicking. I just couldn't understand. I was doing all the things that say we're supposed to be happy, and I have everything that I need financially and material. I have the material things, I have the titles and the accomplishments, but I just couldn't feel happy. So I went on a search to find that. And so it started with me,
I think that many people who are listening can relate to that feeling of not being fulfilled. All of us who are legal nurse consultants come from a nursing background, and many of us have a lot of years of taking care of patients. It can be a very routine, mundane job where you're doing the same things over and over again. The details change, the patients change, but the activities can be very repetitive. How do you find meaning in a life where you've got a lot of boring, repetitive work that makes up your daily existence?
Right. So I think that's everybody, right? We all have things that we do that we don't jump for joy, right? That's just part of life, but there has to be something in there that we feel connected to, right? So we find meaning by having a connection to who we are and what we can provide to that person or to that organization or to the community or whatever it may be. But we have to have some kind of inner connection to what we're doing. If not, it's not going to bring any fulfillment, right? Because although you may, like I said, I bring up the material thing a lot because a lot of people have all the things, but they don't mean anything, right? So our work and what we do every day, we need to feel a deeper purpose to that to feel good.
Well, and you can lose the things in an instant. Your life can change in a heartbeat. You could have a house fire or an apartment fire, and everything that you own turns into ashes. Literally. I mean, right now, as we're recording this, there are wildfires in California. I just saw a message on my iPhone that there are people who are being forced to evacuate their homes because of fires. They're at risk of losing all their material possessions.
Right. And, that happens with business owners. They might go bankrupt. People go through divorces, they lose everything. And it comes down to, if you're living a life that matters to you and you have a purpose to what you get up and do every day, no one can take that away from you. No one can take that away from you. It doesn't matter where you are or what you have, no one can take that away from you.
I talk to people frequently who feel like they are stuck in their situation. They are afraid to take risks. They're afraid to move out of their comfort zone, as you've identified as the title of your book, Stepping Out of Your Comfort Zone. They're terrified about getting their feet wet and going into an uncertain area, into the swamp of uncertainty. So they stay on the shore with their feet dry, but they're unhappy. What can we offer people who feel stuck like that in terms of advice for being able to move away from that position of safety and be able to take risks in a comfortable way?
So understanding what it means to be stuck, right? So when we say stuck, that means that we've been in the same place for a very long time without feeling like we're moving forward or progressing or anything that feels good, right? So the term stuck, that's where all the people I work with are. They're stuck at a certain point in their lives, whether it be they're stuck in an unhappy marriage, a job that they've dedicated their lives to for 20 years, or maybe it's their entire life that they feel stuck in. So, regardless of where someone feels stuck, they need to start taking small steps to get out of that. So the idea is, if you're feeling stuck, you need to start making steps, right? And it doesn't have to be a black or white thing where you're taking these major steps and you're completely letting everything go. It has to be a small, gradual process of stepping away from those things that don't make you feel good and exploring the other side of that. What is outside of where you feel stuck? You have to start making steps to figure that out. So it just begins with small steps of discovering what else is out there for you.
The small steps are important. I think you're touching on something that is essential. It sounds to me like it's almost like a deconditioning process. By facing your fears and making small steps, you take on risks, but some of those risks pay off. Some of them don't, but some of them do. And then that reinforces that feeling of success. Is that what you have seen happen with people who are able to make those small steps?
Absolutely. So it's like when you start to make these small steps towards whatever it is, you start to feel, some joy or like excitement, or, oh, this is interesting, or, oh, okay, and so people feel stuck because they don't know, they don't want to take the risk to try something different because they're afraid of failing and they don't know what that's going to look like. So people stay where they're at because it's comfortable, and even though it doesn't feel good, it's familiar, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people start to take these small steps out of what feels familiar, and they're trying new things, and it's like life becomes exciting again. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, I'm finding all these things about me that I didn't know existed, or I'm using different sides of my brain and different ways of thinking and different ways of being. And oh, wow, this is amazing. I didn't even know I had this. So even in just taking small steps to see a different side of you will bring out different parts of who you are. And that's where you get started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you keep going. So the biggest mistake that people make is they up and they leave, and they don't, make these gradual steps. And like you said, it's a reprogramming process of who we are, how we think, how we behave. And to sustain, a different level of self or a different level of thinking, you have to do that gradually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you have to do it in pieces, right? So I actually work with people that, they're in an unhappy marriage, they're in an unhappy business, they have all these pieces that are unhappy. So we work piece by piece and we take gradual steps. And so where people, like I said, fail or they, get scared is they take these giant steps and they have no idea what to do when they get there because they didn't prepare themselves to think and be that way. So it's all about a preparation and a process and a reprogramming your mind and yourself process.
It's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking about the continuum of taking risks. I worked with a person for a while who was terrified of marketing and didn't want to go to bar exam or bar meetings, bar association meetings where she would meet attorneys. She didn't want to exhibit. She didn't want to make cold calls. She didn't want to make cold visits. She just didn't want to do anything that would make her uncomfortable. And then I also talked to a man who quit his job and said, I'm going to make this legal nurse consulting business successful. And he cut off all of his income, and 5 months later was still struggling to get his first client. So you have the total courage, maybe not well-founded courage at one end, and the no courage at all at the other end. And I think what you're describing, if I'm understanding it, is something in between those two extremes.
Right, like don't jump off the cliff, but don't stay back on the mountain either. So gradually make your way like down the mountain. Don't just jump. Ease your way into jumping, right? So absolutely. So, and that's the part where, you have to not know where you're going to end up, but know that you want to take steps towards moving away from where you currently are, right? So you can take risks to find more for yourself, whether it be a business or, maybe it's leaving your marriage, whatever it is, you need to take steps into moving away from who you used to be and how you used to live to go to that new place, right? And keep adjusting along the way. So you're constantly adapting and adjusting along the way. And, that's how you don't lose everything, or, have a nervous breakdown because you've grown into that place. You have to grow into that place.
And you shared in your book, in the beginning of the book, a story about a relationship you were in that suddenly ended in a tragic way. Can you tell us about how that evolved and how that changed your perspective on the fragility of life?
Right. So when I was 26, I was in a relationship with somebody. We were engaged and we were both very successful people. We actually even shared a business together, and that person, decided to take their life unexpectedly. And so I went from having a happy life, a happy relationship, a happy business, all this stuff that I thought was happy, to, oh my gosh, what just happened? And, what does my life mean? And what does life mean? And why are people that are, seemingly happy, not wanting to be alive anymore? Because the person I was with from the outside, you would look and think that they had everything, and then I realized, well, wow, life should mean more than this, what is, it made me question everything. So it was a large awakening moment in my life of, what is actual happiness, and why aren't we happy when we have everything that society says we should be happy about, And so that moment made me realize that there's much more to happiness in life than what we think, checking the boxes, so to speak, of what happiness is or what success is, because that's something different for everybody. Happiness and success looks totally different to each of us. And so I realized that we need to find that individual experience for success and happiness for ourselves, but so many of us aren't doing that, or we don't even know how to do that. We're not even taught to do that. So that's kind of where that life-changing moment where I lost somebody that was the love of my life, and I also ended up losing a business because I couldn't run it on my own and I had to start over.
Yep.
that starting over process was a discovery process into who I was and what I actually needed for my personal experience to be happy and to feel successful. And it was something totally different than what I had chose, which is what a lot of people are doing. We're choosing, but it's not really the authentic choice that we should be making for ourselves.
Did you ever get any insight as to what his motivation was for the final act of taking his life? I mean, what led to
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. So this is somebody that came from a very wealthy family and ran a bunch of businesses, was also in the entertainment industry as well, was a musician. And as a musician, he had lost some of his success. You know, he had actually toured and things started to die down. He became very successful at a very young age. And you know how you hear about all these people that are young, you know, and they get the success and then they have the downfall. Well, he started to have the downfall. He had the downfall in his entertainment career, but his businesses were flourishing, you know, but because of the pressure from his family and, you know, outside pressures of, you know, meeting these standards of success and what he should be doing, he couldn't handle the pressure. You know, he always felt like he was failing. He could never get back to a place of feeling like, you know, I'm on top again. So, you know, you get those highs of being at a success level where everybody loves you. Well, when you're not doing as well, people don't want to talk to you anymore. So a lot of people that he was friends with when he was like in the spotlight, you know, in the entertainment industry, they started fading away. And his family started pressuring him to be more successful in business because, you know, he had to make up for all that, you know. So
Mm.
it was the societal pressures and the pressures of being in the spotlight and the pressures of, you know, coming from a very successful family that they just felt like he wasn't meeting the standards of that anymore, and he couldn't handle it anymore. You know, and I work with entrepreneurs every day. The same thing. You know, you have this. You put so much pressure on yourself as a, oh, I need to be at this level, or I need to make these goals, and it's like, well, that really has nothing to do with your happiness. You know, like you have to do with what feels good. You know, so that was really it. Like he just couldn't feel happy in where he was at in life because everyone was telling him he should be more. You know.
I think that's a great message for us to absorb when we tie our identity up to how well our business is doing or how well people expect us to do. And then there's a gap. There's a sense of failure. And you talked about the fear of failure earlier in the show. That sense of failure and that sense of identity can pull you apart, can literally rip you apart if your whole sense of happiness is based on how well is my business doing? How well am I doing in my job? My husband and I borrowed $1 million in the early part of the 1980s, and my husband's business failed after 2 years, in part because the interest rate was 24% a month that he had to pay back on the loans, and it wasn't ever going to be successful. But his identity was tied up with the fact that his business failed, and it put him into a depression that took almost a year to get him out of because of that sense of self-worth was gone. So the story of your fiance and the story of my husband are parallel in that way, although luckily he's still alive and he's functioning and doing well. But that was a very tough time in our marriage and in his life because of the
Right.
failure of his business.
Right. So maybe not everyone goes to the place of not wanting to live anymore, but they go into these places of being really depressed and not feeling like they're worth anything because their worth, you know, their net worth is going down. But that has nothing to do with what kind of value we bring as a person. So it's
Yes.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the fear of failure. We talked about the fears associated with taking risks. We talked a little bit about the discomfort and the fact that you have to face your discomfort in order to be able to grow and change as a business owner, as a person in our field, helping attorneys in a very high stakes field where there's a lot of money at stake in lawsuits. And what the legal nurse consultant does to help the attorney could be pivotal in terms of helping an attorney win a case, or whether that's a plaintiff attorney or a defense attorney. Tell us a little bit more about the ways that you can take that feeling of discomfort and face it head on. I know you talked about taking small risks at a time. Is there anything else that we could be thinking about or focusing on to deal with that discomfort?
Right. So I think that we have to just be okay with being uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always supposed to feel comfortable. It's not always supposed to feel okay, right? So some of the biggest decisions that we'll ever make will make us feel anxious and uncomfortable. But that's just because we don't know what's going to happen. We have to be okay with feeling unsure, right? And trust that what makes us feel excited or feel good, before we take those steps, we think, oh, that's interesting, or I could maybe do that. Or, a lot of people come up with these, we've had, for example, a book. Someone might have a book idea for 10 years. But they say, oh, well, I'm not a good writer. I can't write, or nobody's going to buy the book. It's like, but that whole idea, all those ideas of the book excite me, but I don't actually think I can be successful. Right. So it's about not attaching to success or failure. It's about following what you feel good and excited about, and not attaching to what will come about. Right. Like knowing that if you succeed or fail in whatever it is, it's about the experience in the moment. Right. Because you can write a book and feel joyful the entire time you're writing that book, but no one buys it. Maybe 2 people buy it. Does it mean that you wasted your time on that book? No, it means that you provided a really great experience for your life, right? Because your life's the journey, right? It's not about where you end up. It's about where you're at today. Because the only time we're in is the day that we're at right now. We're not in tomorrow, right? So you could have something that's a massive failure, but you completely enjoyed it, right? So it's about understanding that experiences are a lot more important than the success or the failure, right? But also not ruining your entire life by, starting a business with no money, or, so you always want to have things that stabilize you while you're taking steps towards things that you're passionate about. So it's about having that stable foundation, right? So that's how you can feel okay with taking risks, by always having that foundation. And don't just jump and let go of that foundation, right? So that foundation sometimes could be doing things that you don't enjoy. It could be keeping that job that you don't enjoy, or doing certain things that you don't enjoy, but they're providing stability while you're doing these things that you're passionate about.
And I know that as the small percentage of the population in the world, entrepreneurs make up like about 5% of all people who walk this planet. We are wired to take risks, but we're also focused on taking reasonable risks. And I think that's what you're identifying as so important, is looking at what you can do to create some stability, but at the same time being true to your desire to be an entrepreneur. And that runs in our blood, Melissa. There's no way to get it out. And it's like this force that says, oh, I could start another business. Oh, I could change this about my business. Oh, I don't have to get anybody's permission. I don't have to go, like in the nursing world, when I was in nursing administration and staff development, I couldn't do anything without getting permission from my boss. And sometimes she said no, much to my horror. She still said no to me at times. When you're an entrepreneur, you can take risks, and there's nobody sitting there going, oh no, Melissa, can't do that, and fill out Form 1701, not happening.
Right. So there's a part of that where you want to do things that bring you joy, right? But you don't need to go all in. So it's all about, you don't have to go all in. And you don't have to go all in now, right? So maybe that means like it's a gradual process of, oh, I have, my day job and I want to start this project, or I want to start this business, or whatever it is. You can make that a 5-year thing. Like, you know, and maybe you say, well, I'm going to make this successful in 5 years, but maybe it becomes successful in 2 years, but you just continuously step towards that, right? And you don't have to do everything now. So maybe you have several things that you're like, I really want to take risks and do all these things. You don't need to do them all at once, like, this is what I'm working on this year, and next year I'm going to go ahead and try to take some steps in this other area. And especially with entrepreneurs and business people, we want to do everything all at once. We want to do 5 things and take them all on at one time. Well, of course that's not going to work out. We're spreading ourselves too thin, and we're not being strategic. So it's about being strategic. And this is the thing I do as a business strategist. I help people make these large changes in their business or their organization, but it's over a course of time. So it's about understanding it doesn't need to all be right now.
In your book, you talked about a 2-year period in which you learned many new things and took on many roles. Can you summarize for our listener what those things were that you did when you were shifting away? Your life changed suddenly, literally overnight. What did you do to expand your own horizons?
Everything. So I just had realized, I had that big self awakening, that awareness where I was like, okay, I have all these areas of my life, so if we look at life as a circle, right? And, we have all these pie pieces to our lives, relationships, job, our health, our well-being, our passions, our creative interests, all these things in the circle of like what our life can be, and looking at that and saying, well, what pie pieces are actually fulfilled? A lot of people men usually focus on their career, and women, they're usually focusing on their family, or, being a parent, or being a great mom, a great sister, a great, all these, women are more focused on their family, and men are more focused on their career. But then these other pieces of that pie are empty. We're not taking care of our health, or we're not looking at our creative interests, or all these things that we could be doing in our lives. So many of us are not fulfilling these other pieces of who we are, right? So we don't even actually know who we are as a full person. So I looked at myself as a whole and said, where are the gaps? And that was where I really spent 2 years filling those gaps in. Like, okay, I'm not taking care of my health. I'm not really connected with my friends, and I don't even have great friendships. I have friendships, but they're surface level. So I'm looking at all these different areas and saying, how can I make them better, right? And so doing that inventory for 2 years, I spent a lot of time on my health, because I realized, I could be living a much healthier lifestyle, and working out and eating better. And I really looked at my friendships. I had a lot of friends, but like none of them really were people I would like to talk about my life with, so that was like, wow, okay. And for me, success was always an easy thing. I always worked really hard. So for my success, I always had success, but I didn't have, what is my work meaningful? So I looked at that too, So I looked at all these pieces and I said, how can I start making improvements on them? And I did those piece by piece. I didn't say, oh, I have 5 areas that I don't like and I'm going to do them all now. I said, okay, what is the most important right now? And the most important thing was my health, right? And my well-being. So I worked on, my mental health and my physical health. That was where I started. Those were the most critical areas. So I talk to people and I say, well, look at the most critical areas, the places that are so unbalanced, they're so off, that are just on such a lower level, like start there. So that's what I did. And then I kept, working on other things along the way.
That's a great message for us, Melissa, because I know that there are other people besides me who want to fix everything at once. And that's a recipe for frustration maybe not seeing the kind of progress that you want when you've got it scattered over several aspects of your life or your business.
Right. Right. And it's about just starting to look at those things and really look at them, right? Because a lot of times things are so bad that we don't want to look at them. Oh, my marriage has been so bad for 10 years. I'm just going to stay here until, the kids get older, and then maybe I'll think about leaving. Or, oh, no, I'm not leaving at all. There's certain things that they're so bad that or maybe our mental health, maybe we're not sleeping, maybe we're depressed and anxious, but we're not doing anything about it. So it's about looking at what you have been avoiding and really taking a great big look at that and saying, okay, I need to really start working on these things.
Mm-hmm. We've covered a lot of territory in our talk, Melissa, and you've stimulated so many ideas in my head. I encourage our listeners to get a copy of Stepping Out of Your Comfort Zone by Melissa Lucas. They can obtain that on Amazon, Melissa?
Correct. Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Mm-hmm.
We've talked about facing your fear of failure, facing the risks, facing and tackling the discomfort that's associated with taking risks, that feeling of stepping off a cliff and not knowing what's beneath you is part of that entrepreneurial rush. But it's important to take measured, careful risks and not do things that are going to blow your life apart all simultaneously in many spheres, so that you've got enough stability to be able to move forward and achieve the goals that you've set for yourself.
Right. Absolutely.
How can our listeners find out more about you, Melissa?
So you can find me in a couple different ways. You can find me, I spend a lot of time on Instagram. So you can find me on Instagram at Edge of Your Comfort. You can find me on my website, edgeofyourcomfortzone.com. If you go to my website, edgeofyourcomfortzone.com, my podcast is on there, all of my work's on there, and all of my other social links are on there as well. And you can find my book, Stepping Out of Your Comfort Zone, on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us, sharing your insights. I know that your words are going to resonate with our audience when they think about taking risks, and the framework that you've given us of taking small risks and doing it in not all aspects of your life simultaneously is a message that I think is going to stick with our audience. Thank you so much for being on the show, Melissa.
Thank you for having me. It was great seeing you again as well.
And thank you to you, our listener. Be sure to tune in next week when we have a new show, a new guest to interview. Make sure that you're going to legalnursebusiness.com to check out what we offer as education, free reports, blog posts, webinars, courses, and videos. They're all available for you to learn and expand your skills so that you feel comfortable taking risks. They're all consolidated as well on BizEdu, which is our new mobile app that you can download at legalnursebusiness.com/BizEdu. And if you would like to talk with me about your business and how to move forward, be sure to sign up for a call with me, and we can explore how we can help you move out of your comfort zone and into a place of greater success.